Welcome to Build Strong Habits podcast channel. Sit back, relax, take your eyes off the screen, and listen. Just listen to this audio podcast, and let's start building habits that transform our life.
Welcome back, everyone. I'm excited for our deep dive today because I think this is something we can all relate to. You know those times when you're super motivated to finally get in shape,
No.
learn a new language or conquer that inbox,
Yeah,
but then life happens
it always does.
and those grand plans kind of fizzle out.
Yeah, it's the classic cycle, setting goals and then not quite hitting them.
Totally.
Yeah.
So what if, instead of trying to change everything at once, we focused on mastering just one thing
Mm.
at a time? It sounds kind of counterintuitive, right?
Yeah, it does.
But that's what some research suggests might be the key to making lasting change.
So you're saying that instead of spreading ourselves thin across multiple goals, it's actually better to concentrate our energy on just a single habit.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So let's unpack this. What's the science behind this approach?
Right.
Why does zeroing in on one habit increase our chances of making it stick?
Well, think about it. Our brains have a limited amount of willpower.
Okay.
When we try to tackle multiple goals at once, we're basically depleting that willpower pool way faster. It makes it harder to stay consistent with any of those goals.
So it's like trying to run multiple demanding programs on your computer at the same time.
Exactly.
Eventually, things start to slow down. The system gets overloaded.
Precisely. By focusing on one habit at a time, we're giving our brains the space, the energy to commit to that one change.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
And this is where the concept of implementation intentions comes in, right?
Yes, exactly.
I've heard that term before, but refresh my memory.
Implementation intentions are essentially a pre-commitment strategy where you create a very specific plan for when, where, and how you'll carry out your desired habit.
So instead of just saying, I want to exercise more,
Right. It's not enough.
you'd say something like, every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 7 a.m., I'll go for a 30-minute run in the park.
Exactly. You're taking the guesswork out of it.
No more decision fatigue.
Exactly. You're telling your brain what to do and when to do it.
And the research on this is pretty impressive.
Right. Studies show that people who use implementation intentions are 2 to 3 times more likely to stick with their goals.
Wow.
That's a huge difference.
Compared to those who rely solely on motivation or willpower.
So it really highlights the power of planning and removing those mental barriers.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's like you're setting yourself up on autopilot. By creating this clear roadmap, you're making it much easier for your brain to follow through without constantly having to negotiate or make decisions in the moment.
So this strategy helps us get over that initial hurdle of starting a new habit.
It does.
Because for me, sometimes just getting started is the biggest challenge.
Absolutely. And there's another fascinating aspect to this approach, the concept of automaticity. This is where the magic of focusing on one habit at a time really comes into play.
Okay, automaticity. I like the sound of that. Tell me more.
You got it. So it's like being on autopilot, where the behavior becomes so ingrained, it requires less and less effort.
Okay. Like when you first learn to drive.
You have to concentrate on every little thing.
Yeah, the steering wheel, the pedals, checking your mirrors.
Oh, yeah. It's exhausting.
It is. But then over time, with practice, those actions become almost second nature.
You don't even have to think about it.
Exactly. Your brain is incredibly efficient with repetition.
Mm-hmm.
Those complex actions get chunked together into a single streamlined process that frees up mental bandwidth for other tasks.
Okay, so the behavior becomes effortless.
Precisely. And this is why focusing on one habit at a time is so crucial.
I see.
Because it allows us to dedicate all our energy to that one behavior, speeding up the process of making it automatic.
So if I'm trying to meditate daily,
Yeah.
the more consistent I am with my practice, the more likely it'll become an ingrained part of my routine.
Exactly. There's research that actually charted this process. It's fascinating.
Done.
One study focused on people building the habit of taking a 10-minute walk after breakfast each day.
Okay.
Researchers found that it took, on average, about 66 days for the behavior to become automatic.
66 days.
Hmm.
That's interesting. But I imagine it varies from person to person.
Right. Of course, some habits might take longer to become automatic, while others might click more quickly. There's no magic number that applies to everyone. But what the research does show is that consistency is key.
Makes sense.
The more consistently we repeat a behavior, the stronger those neural pathways become, And the faster we reach that point of automaticity.
So patience and persistence are key.
Absolutely. And this is also where the concept of identity shift comes in.
Okay, identity shift.
Yeah, it's not just about changing our behaviors.
Got it.
It's about changing our beliefs
Yeah.
about ourselves.
Okay, what do you mean by that?
So, for example, instead of thinking, I'm trying to quit smoking,
Right.
you start seeing yourself as a non-smoker.
I
And you make choices that reflect this new identity.
So our actions align with our internal sense of self.
Exactly. Over time, those choices reinforce that belief.
It's a powerful cycle. When our behaviors and our self-perception align,
Yeah.
it creates this sense of, like, congruence. That makes it easier to maintain those positive changes.
It does.
This is all making so much sense. Okay, so how do we practically apply these ideas
Right.
to our lives? We've got the science. Now let's talk strategy.
Sure.
Where do we even begin? How do we choose that one habit to focus on?
That's a great question. And there's no one-size-fits-all answer.
Okay.
But here's a framework that I found helpful.
Okay.
Think about the habits that have the biggest ripple effect
Ripple effect.
across other areas of your life.
I like that. So, for example, if I'm struggling with energy levels,
Yeah.
focusing on improving my sleep
Yeah.
could have a positive impact on my mood, productivity, even my fitness routine.
Exactly. It's
Yeah.
about identifying those keystone habits that, when mastered, create a cascade of positive change throughout your life.
Okay, so let's say we've identified our keystone habit, the
Okay.
one we want to tackle. How do we craft that rock-solid implementation intention? What are the essential ingredients?
Remember, specificity is key. You want to clearly define the when, where, and how of your habit. So instead of saying, I'm going to eat healthier,
Right, too vague.
you might say, every weekday for breakfast, I'll have a smoothie with spinach, berries, and protein powder at 7:30 a.m. in my kitchen.
Okay, so you're removing any ambiguity. No more decision-making in the moment.
Exactly. The decision's already been made. You just follow the plan.
And you're also attaching your new habit to an existing routine.
That's a great point.
Like, after I brush my teeth each morning, I'll meditate for 5 minutes.
Perfect example. You're leveraging the power of association.
Makes it easier to remember.
And follow through.
Yeah. And another important thing is to start small.
Yes.
Gradually increase the difficulty.
Don't try to go from 0 to 60 overnight.
Exactly. It's about setting ourselves up for success with small wins that build confidence.
Absolutely. You want to create a plan that's both challenging and achievable, one that fits into your life and supports your long-term goals.
This is all so insightful.
Okay.
Okay, but let's be real. Life happens.
It does.
There are going to be days when we slip up,
Sure.
when that old habit creeps back in.
It's normal.
So how do we deal with those setbacks?
First of all, it's important to remember that setbacks are a normal part of the process. Everyone slips up occasionally. Don't beat yourself up about it.
That's easier said than done, though.
Right.
I know.
But it's so important.
Yeah. It's like we expect ourselves to be superhuman, never making a mistake.
Right. But the key is to view those slip-ups as learning opportunities,
Okay.
not as reasons to give up.
So if I miss a workout,
Yeah.
instead of thinking, oh, I've ruined everything,
Right.
I could ask myself, okay, what happened? What can I learn from this? What can I do differently next time?
Exactly. It's about shifting your mindset from self-criticism to curiosity and problem-solving. Analyze the situation, identify the factors that led to the slip-up, and adjust your plan accordingly.
So we can get back on track.
Exactly.
Okay. What about those times when we're feeling really tempted to fall back into old patterns?
Yeah.
What are some strategies for staying strong in those moments?
One technique that I find really helpful is to anticipate those moments of temptation.
Okay. And create a plan for how you'll handle them. So be prepared.
Exactly.
Mm.
If you tend to crave sugary snacks in the afternoon, plan to have a piece of fruit or some nuts ready to go.
So you have a healthy option on hand.
Right. You're removing the opportunity
Right.
for that impulsive decision.
I love that. Be proactive rather than reactive.
Yes.
And what about support and accountability?
Oh, that's huge.
Yeah.
Having a support system, whether
Yeah.
it's a friend, a family member, a coach, or even an online community,
Yeah.
can provide encouragement, accountability, a sense of shared purpose.
It's like having a cheerleader in your corner.
Exactly.
All right.
Even just sharing your goals with someone can increase your commitment
Uh,
and make you more likely to follow through.
This has been such a practical conversation. I love how we've gone beyond the abstract
Me too.
and given our listeners some real tools
Yeah.
that they can use to make real changes in their lives.
We've covered a lot of ground, but there's still so much more to explore. So we've been talking about the science and strategy of habit change. You know, how focusing on one habit at a time can lead to really remarkable transformations.
It's powerful stuff.
It is. And I know our listeners are eager to hear how these concepts actually play out in real life.
Yeah, I think hearing those real-life stories, those aha moments, can be incredibly inspiring.
Absolutely. So do you have any particularly compelling success stories you could share with our listeners?
Let me think. There's one that comes to mind. It's about a musician named David.
Okay.
He had been struggling with writer's block for months.
Oh, writer's block. I can imagine. That feeling of being creatively paralyzed must be incredibly frustrating.
Especially for someone whose work depends on that creative flow.
Right. So what did he do?
Well, David decided to try this approach we've been talking about.
Okay. Focusing on one habit at a time.
Exactly. Instead of trying to force inspiration, he committed to simply sitting down at his piano for 30 minutes each morning, whether he felt inspired or not.
So he created an implementation intention.
Yes. A specific plan for when, where, and how he would engage in this creative practice.
No more waiting for the muse to strike.
Exactly. Just show up and do the work.
I love that.
Yeah.
So what happened?
Well, at first it was tough.
Yeah, I bet.
Some mornings, he felt like he was just going through the motions, playing scales and chords without any real direction.
But he stuck with it.
He did. And over time, something interesting started to happen.
Oh, what was that?
By simply showing up and engaging in the practice, even when he didn't feel inspired, those creative sparks started to reignite.
So the habit itself became the catalyst.
Exactly. Melodies began to flow, ideas started to take shape, and the more consistent he was, the more effortless the process became.
It's like by removing the pressure of expectation and simply focusing on the act of creation, he actually created the space for inspiration to emerge.
That's the beauty of this approach. It's not about forcing change. It's about creating the conditions for change to unfold naturally.
I love that. So inspiring. And it really highlights the power of consistency.
It does.
And trust in the process, even when it feels like
Wait.
we're not making progress.
Yeah, those small, consistent actions are laying the groundwork for breakthroughs.
And it's not always about those big dramatic transformations either.
Right.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's the subtle, almost imperceptible changes that accumulate over time and create a ripple effect.
Yeah, that transform our lives in profound ways.
Absolutely.
So it's not about overnight successes. It's about the small wins, the daily practices, the consistent effort that over time reshape our habits, our beliefs, and ultimately, your lives.
Well said.
This has been such an insightful exploration of habit change. You know, we've covered so much, from the science of automaticity to the power of identity shift.
It's been a great conversation.
And I know our listeners are walking away with a toolkit, the practical strategies that they can actually use to make real changes in their lives.
It's been a pleasure diving deep into this topic with you and with our listeners.
Likewise. And on that note, I think it's time to wrap up this deep dive.
Sounds good.
But before we go, I want to leave our listeners with one final thought-provoking question.
Okay.
As you go about your day, consider this. What one habit, if mastered, could have the biggest positive ripple effect across other areas of your life?
It's a great question. Let that question simmer. And remember, you have the power to create lasting change. One habit, one step at a time.
That's a wrap for this week's Deep Dive. Until next time, happy habit building, everyone.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this podcast, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Build Strong Habits. Let us know in the comments how you feel about it and what topics you'd love to hear next. Always remember, we're here to build strong habits together.